You're listening to Strange by Nature, your guide to the strange, weird, unbelievable, and improbable wonders of the natural world.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for being here today. I am Kirk Mona, and I am joined today by Rachel Ginza and Victoria Thompson. We are all professional naturalists who together have scoured the world for weird and wonderful wonders just to please your mammalian brain's desire for novelty. Isn't that nice? Let's do this.
Welcome back to the show, everybody. Once again, we are joined with Rachel and Victoria. Good to have you here.
Great to be here.
Oh my gosh, what a week. So last week, I talked about ants, right? The pavement ants. And I thought, I want to really mix things up this week, do something completely different. So this week, I'm going to talk about ants.
Ants?
Yeah, I'm
so
talking about ants
excited
again.
for this topic. Something fresh.
This happens sometimes. You get on a topic and then like you find something else interesting while you're researching that, and I'm like, well, God, now I got to talk about this. And I'm like, do I separate them out? I'm like, no, we're just doing an ant bonanza here. I'm doing 2 ant episodes. Look, folks, next week will not be ants, I promise. But this is kind of a cool thing. I don't believe you.
I'm going to find an ant thing just to have you do 3 weeks of ants.
I mean, I've already got some really cool stuff planned for the next couple of weeks, so it's not ant related. Sorry. I'm not doing pavement ants again, though. But this time, an ant that kind of in a way was mentioned a little bit in last week's show, actually, was the carpenter ant. And specifically this time, the Florida carpenter ants. So probably not the ones you have in your house there, Rachel, up in the boreal forest. But much like pavement ants, carpenter ants sometimes get injured. And the specific scientific paper I read about this week didn't specify like how these ants might have gotten injured. You might assume that these are ants that are getting injured in battle, but they're carpenter ants. Maybe they just dropped hammers on their feet. I don't really know.
Kirk, I have to take this off my list now. It's a good thing I didn't choose. I was seriously considering it for this week. And then I was like, well, I'll just wait a little bit. I'll let things settle out. Close call.
Amazing. Wow. We've come close to having the same topic. I think definitely I saw this come up and I was like, oh, look at that. I'll talk about this. So maybe you saw the same story I did. The important bit here is that carpenter ants do sometimes get leg injuries. And a leg injury can be very serious. It often leads to infection and death. And according to a study reported in the journal Current Biology, Florida carpenter ants have a pretty interesting option when they get injured. They can go and see a surgeon.
Yep.
So that's my topic this week. Ant surgeons.
Ant surgeons.
Yeah. So if you're picturing a friendly human surgeon fixing up ants, and think again, because the ant surgeons are other ants.
The ant is in a full-on little doctor's coat with a little like old-fashioned.
I know. I was picturing.
Okay.
I was picturing more like surgical scrubs on ants,
Ooh,
but the lab coat kind of look is fine too. Now, these researchers who studied this showed that when Florida carpenter ants have a laceration injury on their femur or the tibia, they seek relief from their nestmates. And the type of care they receive depends on the location of the injury. And just as an aside, you heard me correctly when I said their femur and tibia. Right. Those actually are the names, the correct names. Well, but I'm not about breaking like breaking the bone. This is like a cut, like a little laceration, right? Oh, okay. But when we talk about when I think about femurs and tibia, I'm thinking about like bones. In your leg. And these are ants. They have exoskeletons. They don't have bones. There isn't a femur or a tibia. But I guess someone long ago, when they decided what to name, parts of an ant leg, were like, oh, let's just call it the femur and tibia. And it's they're kind of
equatable in the same kind of space.
Yeah. So I was going to say they're
they're
in the same places you would expect them to be. But it's sort of like, that's what you went with, huh? Okay. Yeah. A little confusing, but we're stuck with it. Yeah, choices were made. Now, clearly, this was research, and so what they did was they purposely gave ants leg injuries, which could lead to infections. And rude. But they would basically create a laceration on one of two leg portions, and they had one group where they were untreated, and they just like kept them by themselves and observed their chances of survival. And in a second group, they were allowed to hang out with other ants after their injury. Now, for the ants kept apart from the other ants, the results were decidedly not good. 40% of the ants with a femur injury. What's that?
Oh, I said poor ants.
Yeah. 40% of the ants with a femur injury survived, which is not great. I mean, 60% died, while only 15% of those with a tibia injury survived. So these are not good numbers.
Bad odds.
And it turns out the reason why is because wound infection in ants can very quickly be deadly. Now, for those ants that were allowed to be with the other ants, something remarkable happened. The other ants treated their wounds. And what treatment you got actually depended on where the injury was, which is the part that's really interesting. So if an ant had a tibia laceration, the other ants would do their best to clean the wound. And basically this is like kind of licking the wound, okay? They're, like you might think of. They're using their mouths to...
Yeah, I was about to be like, they don't have tongues, right? Though.
I know. That's why I tried to not use the phrase licking the wound, but it's kind of the same idea. They're using their mouths to clean this wound area. And this is basically an effort to remove any bacteria from the wound. Now, there are some other species of ants that have been observed to actually have like secretions on their body that are antibacterial they can put on other ants that are injured. These ones don't have that. They're just using their mouths to clean the wound the best they can. But this cleaning-only technique took the survival rate from just 15% up to 75%, which is amazing. I think it really goes to show how important it is to keep wounds clean, right?
Wash your cuts.
Yes. If the ants had a femur injury, though, the process is a little bit different. Femur injuries were also carefully cleaned to stop infection, and then the ants would amputate the entire leg by chewing it off.
What? Why would you clean it?
Yeah. Well, again, to, try to prevent the spread of disease.
I mean, yeah, but if you already are
scrubbing up before you go into the operating room.
You're already cutting off the entire leg. You're chewing it. Why are you cleaning it?
Well, there may actually be a reason for that. It's partially because it takes time to do the amputation, and you don't want anything to be spreading while you're doing that procedure. Is probably why they're cleaning it first. But they really are surgeons. That's why, I use that word, and that's why researchers use that word. The downside is they only know one operation, and that's amputation, which.
Sort of like Civil War surgeons or something.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. It's very much a Civil War surgeon thing. It's like, here, bite this leather, and here we go. Grab a saw.
And
horrible. But it's pretty extreme, right? However, even though amputation is extreme, so are the results. Ants with femur injuries, if you remember, had a 40% survival rate when left to themselves. But those who had their leg amputated by their fellow ants had a massive 90% survival rate.
Whoa.
Which is a pretty big difference, right? So it's wild, but it also presents, we could just stop right there. And that's the topic, right? These ants are amputating legs, but there's more to it than that because this presents us with a puzzle. So clearly a femur injury is more survivable than a tibia injury based on the numbers when they were left alone.
Yeah, right? Like 15% versus 40%?
15 versus 40, right? So the femur injury is more survivable than a tibia injury. And clearly amputation is more effective than just cleaning wounds. So why not amputate for tibia injuries if they're worse?
Right.
Right? You're actually doing the amputation for the one that's more survivable. And that is kind of weird. And it maybe comes to this idea that, Rachel, you noticed about why are they bothering to clean the wound if they're just going to amputate anyways. Turns out that this amputation is, it's not real quick. And the physical structure of an ant leg is such that that tibia damage results in much faster infection, and that infection spreads to the rest of the body much faster than damage to the femur. And that just has to do with kind of how the liquids move through the body and whatnot. But the point is that the tibia, if that gets injured, it's much more likely to cause serious damage. So you're like, yeah, I know. So amputate it, right? Then get it off. Here's the problem. The surgeons are not fast. It can take them up to 40 minutes to remove a leg. And that's just awful. Like, I don't like that. I go back to that Civil War thing of the hacksaw. Like, you want that to happen quickly, and having your friends chew your leg off, don't take 40 minutes to do it. Like, not great. So part of what the researchers are speculating is going on here. Because the infection spreads so quickly from a tibia injury, the ants cannot work fast enough to remove it and actually make any difference. After 40 minutes, the infection has already spread to the rest of the body, and it's too late. They're actually better off doing extra wound cleaning to just try to stop as much of the bacteria as possible, rather than going through with the actual amputation. And true, it's not as effective, like having a 75% versus 90% survival rate compared to amputation. But since the amputation takes too long, it's too slow, you actually can't get to that 90% survival rate. The survival would actually be lower than 75% because the infection is spread to the rest of the body internally, and then it's too late. So kind of go back to your question, Rachel, I think why they are doing some cleaning before the amputation is it's like, let's try to get rid of any bacteria we can, because it's going to take 40 minutes to take this leg off. And even though it doesn't spread as fast from when you have an injury to the femur area, you still want to do some cleaning up beforehand, because it's going to take you 40 minutes to take that leg off.
Yeah, wow.
Which is, it's wild. It's really, there's so much about this story that sort of fascinates me. I mean, first of all, that these ants can treat wounds is pretty wild. Mm-hmm. That they know what treatment is best for which kind of wound and like which treatment to do, also wild. It's an incredible story about healthcare in ants, but really I think it's also an amazing story about intelligence and what we mean by intelligence. I don't think the ants are actually, like teaching these techniques in ant medical school and doing their own experiments to see which medical intervention is the most effective in the situation, right? But yet the species has survived by having this knowledge and using it. And we can call it instinct. Well, it's just instinct. They know to do this. But in my experience, when we use that word instinct, it's really just like a hand-wavy way of saying, we don't really understand.
Yeah.
We don't really know how they know to do this, right? And that's where we're going to leave it for now. We don't understand exactly how they know to do this, but we know that they do it, which I think makes it all the stranger. So my sources for this were a couple things. There was an article in Current Biology called Wound-Dependent Leg Amputations to Combat Infections in Ant Society. And then also there was an article in Science Daily about this called An Ant That Selectively Amputates the Infected Limbs of Wounded Sisters. So pretty cool thing.
Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, sorry to take your story idea, Victoria. Was there anything that I missed, Victoria, that you had you had seen about it?
I hadn't researched it in depth. I just seen like an article on one of my news sources. But yeah, that's a really cool story.
Pretty wild. All right, well, we'll take a break and we'll go and we'll have Rachel's story next after the break. See you soon.
Woo! Welcome back to the show, everyone. Kirk, wild. This actually came to me from while we were taking a little bit of a break. We were talking about how our news stories and everything sometimes give us stories from the news from like over 10 years ago.
And you're like, why am I getting this on my feed now?
But I mean, thank you.
But weird,
like,
right?
thanks. This is awesome. No. It's weird. Great. Love it.
Not news.
Well, my topic this week definitely made the news in 2016.
Okay.
A little while ago. Yep.
Not only that, but this actually came from as a suggestion a while ago from a listener named Katie. I think we've all worked with Katie. Works with the district that you're in, Kirk.
Noted.
She's pretty great. Takes amazing has some really great photos. So, hi Katie, I'm finally doing this thing that you sent me a while ago.
Awesome, right. Katie, thank you.
So, in 2016, there were a few divers, scuba divers, who were out they're out scuba diving, obviously, because as you do as a scuba diver.
As a scuba diver, yeah, well spotted, Rachel.
Yeah, and Tim Samuel happened to be a wildlife photographer, and as they were scuba diving in Australia in one of the bays, they saw something absolutely bizarre.
Oh, good.
While they were swimming, they saw a fish, like a normal looking little fish, who seemed to be swimming inside of a jellyfish.
Oh,
cool. Okay.
Huh.
So this particular jellyfish and fish combo just were truly like confusing to everyone. So it seems like they were actually swimming around, like they would go kind of in circles. The yellow fish that was inside of the transparent-ish jellyfish, like they were kind of pushing each other along, going around, swimming, or stopping altogether. The yellowfish seemed to maybe be stuck, but we're not really sure. But everyone saw this picture and just went, what is happening? Why is this fish on the inside of the bell of this jelly?
How did this happen?
How did this happen?
Is this intentional? Yeah.
What's going on? So the general consensus of that particular photo, which is a really cool photo in Katie's and everybody else's defense, it's really, really cool. It probably was an accident.
Okay.
Overall. So that particular species of fish and what they think about the jellyfish, they don't have as many interactions with each other. It's not a form of protection. I'll get into that in a little bit. But it also looks like that particular jellyfish was not doing well. It's with its shape, and it was starting to lose tentacles. It was definitely degrading. So they think that the jellyfish took too much. It got a fish that was too big for it, and suffered the consequences when its feeding was just too much for it.
So you're saying like a really serious case of indigestion?
More or less, yeah. So it's a weird thing. But what isn't as weird, well, okay, we're strange by nature. So this is still a strange idea that a fish is using a jellyfish. But it turns out that it's not as strange in nature as you might think. So fish are actually really commonly found around jellyfish. Some fish actually utilize various types of jellyfish for different reasons. From protection, paper nautilus, which Victoria, you actually covered a while ago.
Yeah.
Paper nautiluses will actually sit on the top of a medusa and just rest there for a little bit as like a nice little oasis in the ocean. It will rest on top of the jellyfish.
Little protected spot or no one will mess with you.
Exactly. So there aren't a ton of animals that will go after jellyfish. It's mostly mola molas or sea turtles that will go for it, not necessarily going for the same fish. So
Sure.
being in the tentacles or around the tentacles underneath the bell can be really great protection for a lot of fish. It actually allows them to create a key ecosystem for them to be able to, like the smaller fish are able to bring and like able to eat the things around them, eat some of the phytoplankton and everything, but they're also able to provide the jellyfish with some nutrients as well as get like protection from predators. The fish are getting protection from predators via the jellyfish.
Yeah.
Sure.
It's really cool that they're able to do that. There are some fish that actually make jellyfish. This is pretty much what my topic is: fish using jellyfish for various reasons. Yeah. There are some species that actually will like go into the jellyfish to lure another, like what their prey is, into the tentacles of the jellyfish.
Oh,
then
yeah.
go out, eat the fish, and whatever like bits and pieces are left will be left for the jellyfish that help them prey. It's like a feint type.
Wait, so they're trying to lure in a fish that would otherwise eat them, and then they turn around and eat the fish that was trying to eat them?
Yeah.
Because that is seriously metal. That's hardcore.
It is really, really cool. And it also provides, especially for young fish, as long as they don't mess with the tentacles, it allows young fish actually a good amount of protection, because it's hard to be a small fish in a big ocean.
Yes.
True.
Yeah. So that's mainly what I wanted to talk about. It's a short and sweet story, but they do protect other species and they provide a lot of other benefits other than being like generally kind of scary. I've talked about this on the show. I respect jellyfish, but they're one of the very few animals that I'm like, you're cool. I'm going to keep my distance over here. They're kind of like lionfish for me and chickens. Yeah.
And chickens. I didn't see that coming.
Okay. Chickens, remember that they are dinosaurs. I will stand on this hill.
Fair, especially roosters.
Exactly. So that is what I had for you all this week. The article that I got a couple really good sources this week. One was about the original species. It was a National Geographic article called "Living Fish Found Inside Jellyfish in Bizarre Underwater Scene," and that was in 2016. And then the Marine Conservation Society had a really good article about jellyfish, and so did Earth Touch News Network had a really good animal behavior. Baby fish hide from predators under a jellyfish's translucent bell. Had some really good sources as well. So, yeah.
Awesome.
Nice.
We're going to take a quick break, and when we return, it'll be Victoria.
Hey, we're back. Just a warning, my topic today is all about an unusual type of mating behavior, and it gets a little graphic. So I just wanted to give everyone a heads up in case you want to opt out of this section. Also, it's one of our favorite themes about, humans' boxes and nature laughing at them. So speaking of boxes that humans like to create, what is the definition of a species?
Oh, who knows at this point?
Yeah, right.
Ooh, that's a good question, Victoria.
I'll bite into your trap here.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the classic definitions has been two things that, let's just say animals, for example, that cannot breed with each other.
Yeah. That's one of the definitions. Yeah. It's so interesting because this is like
can't breed with each other. That's one of the definitions. there's a variety of definitions. It depends
Are
on who you
genetically
ask.
distinct populations, yeah.
Yes.
Well, and that's the problem. That's why we say, nature laughs at our little boxes. We want to put everything into a box, and it's a spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
but of course, there's exceptions.
It's this extremely basic, fundamental term of biology, but it turns out that if you ask around among biologists, there is no common agreement on what actually constitutes a species.
A species is, yeah.
And in fact, somebody did a survey on this topic in 2021, and they came up with 16 different species concepts that biologists use in their research.
Nice.
And, when I was in school learning about this, I think the definition that I was given was basically a species can breed among itself and produce fertile offspring, which is basically what you were saying, Rachel. Which,
right.
There are a lot of exceptions to this. And when I was learning this, I feel like this definition was always linked into my mind with the example of mules. So
right. I literally was just thinking about mules, Victoria.
Yeah. That's the example I think that's always given. So a mule is an offspring of two similar but separate species, the horse and the donkey. They're both in the genus Equus, but they're not like a labradoodle. Mules are sterile. You can't breed two mules together to get more mules. Each mule is only the result of a mating of a horse and a donkey. But, this begs
kind of like a liger.
Right, like a liger.
Yeah.
Liger's another good example. Yeah, Tygon.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But, if the offspring of this mating are sterile, why are the horse and the donkey willing, right? Evolutionarily speaking. What's in it for them?
They're cute.
So it's sort of curious that this behavior is there. And that got me thinking. And on a related note, a while ago when I was doing some preliminary research for another topic on my list that I haven't yet covered, I came across some information that this particular species, quote unquote, interacts sexually with other species. And, it got me wondering, how common is this behavior in the animal world? Apparently pretty common.
Good.
Speaking of boxes, I want to put these behaviors into two boxes. One is for sexual behavior between two similar species where you could imagine possible offspring, like horse, donkey, or, lion, tiger.
Sure, yeah.
And the other box is for species that are so dissimilar, you're like, no, they are not going to produce.
Not going to happen.
Nope.
And they can't even produce a non-viable or fertile, non-fertile offspring. Yeah.
No kind of offspring would be produced at all. So
like a turkey and a turtle.
I have
exactly.
Oh my gosh.
Do you have something to share, Rachel?
All right.
This is where we're going this week, apparently. So
I want to talk about the second category first, since this type of interaction is, in fact,
of course,
much rarer, but also more interesting in some ways. So one example I came across, certainly weirder, I guess I'll say weirder, not necessarily more interesting. One example I came across is that young female Japanese macaques, which are a kind of monkey, will climb on top of male sika deer and display mating behavior, including rubbing their genitals along the deer's back.
Okay.
What? Yeah. And the deer just kind of like, some deer throw them off, but others just kind of chill. And some females will even chase off another female that's already interacting with a deer to get their own chance at this deer. I mean, to be clear, there's no genital contact. It's just genital back contact
behavior.
But, yeah. Another example is male sea otters. Oh boy. Forcibly copulating.
What do they do, Victoria?
Yeah. So the term that they use in biology is forcibly copulating with baby seals. Let me tell you, Oh, you thought otters were cute. I thought otters were cute. Sea otters are horrible. Yeah. They're horrible animals, and there's so much more horrible stuff that sea otters do. I just found out when I was researching this. It's going to have to be for another week, I guess. I can't even.
Oh, no. I'm going to wreck everybody's idea about, like,
cute little otters.
About sea otters.
Horny otters, apparently, is the issue.
Moving on to a different phylum. Apparently, there's a grasshopper species where the males will attempt to mate with other species of insects, including flies. Like, how?
Fly, okay.
How did you got to catch them first.
Right? And actually, Alfred Kinsey, the famed sexologist, shared reports of a female ostrich trying to mate with an eland, which is a kind of like an antelope thing, a male dog with a chicken, and a female chimpanzee with a tomcat. So that's, interesting. And
it's a mad world.
Yeah, I would be remiss if I did not also mention that, of course, this is a behavior that occurs in humans, although it is usually heavily stigmatized.
I'm not going to lie.
And often illegal.
I was waiting for that to come up.
Good.
Yeah.
God.
So, all that stuff I talked about is just weird, very weird, interesting, but it's relatively rare. And overall, it isn't really, I don't think it's really very important, ecologically speaking. I think the species or the individuals that are doing that are, they're wasting energy, maybe, which isn't great for them on an individual level. But what's more important...
more like a quirk than a feature.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. They're like, this might be fun. Kind of thought, I suppose.
Yeah.
Well, is it related to the fact that some of them, like, when there's all the hormones get going, it's like they're just not... Thinking is not really the strong suit at that point?
I mean, the sexual impulse is very strong in most species, and, sometimes that comes out in strange ways.
Yeah.
But from an ecological perspective, what's much more important is interbreeding between closely related species, and this behavior is actually very common. So often the result is a sterile hybrid, like mules, but this is not always the case. And there's been some really interesting genetic research that DNA analysis has enabled recently that has shown that in a lot of cases where two species are starting to diverge from one's becoming two, there's a long period where the two populations are getting more and more different, but they're still interbreeding to some extent. But then there can be later events that kind of bring them back together. So, for example, the polar bear and the brown bear, also known as the grizzly bear,
just heard about this.
Oh, okay.
With the brown bear and and the brown bear and the polar bear, and then another one was coyotes and the red wolf.
Oh, okay. I think. Well, let's see if it's the same thing that you heard about that I am going to talk about. I'm not sure if it is.
Okay.
But anyway, they are polar bears and brown bears are closely related. And polar bears started to diverge from brown bears about 500,000 years ago. But they interbred for a long time after that before becoming more separate, stable species. However, a recent study has shown that there were several more recent genetic interchange events at about 120,000 years ago and 25,000 to 10,000 years ago. And the thought is that these may correspond to changes in the climate that forced the polar bears, especially out of their normal range and into the brown bear habitat.
Options are more limited, right?
Yeah. And, of course, we may see more of this kind of thing in the future as the climate changes. And, in fact, climate change and other human-driven habitat changes are behind a lot of interspecies breeding today, again, because it's forcing animals out of their typical territories and into places where they haven't been recently. So another example is between the threatened spotted owl in the Pacific Northwest and the more common barred owl, which is moving westward into its territory, and they can interbreed. They're closely related, and you're getting these hybrid owls that are kind of
something new,
pushing the spotted owl out.
Mm-hmm.
So in fact, there is discussion about whether huge numbers of barred owls should be culled to give the spotted owl a better chance, which
I saw that article too. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, such mixed feelings on that.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's like, but why do animals do this? I don't really know. I think I didn't find a lot exactly about the whys of it, but I think if you think about it from an evolutionary perspective, I think it's probably partly just the sex drive thing we were talking about, but also it could be a mechanism against inbreeding and in favor of introducing new and potentially helpful genes into the gene pool. And
if it works, it could be start of something beautiful.
And hybrids in plants and hybrids in animals, all kinds of hybrids can be more fit. Something called hybrid vigor. It's well known. So yeah, it's just kind of interesting to contemplate, and got to talk about some really weird mating stuff for this episode.
Freaky stuff.
Yep. Had lots of sources for this, more than I can name, but some of the main ones were an article in JSTOR Daily, which is a blog by James McDonald. New York Times article by Carl Zimmer from February 2024 on what is a species. An article from Cell called Quantifying the Use of Species Concepts. And the stuff about otters came from a Vox article. Thanks, Vox. And
thanks for ruining that.
Appreciate
some of these sources I was able to track down, and just some examples I was able to find were on the very helpful Wikipedia page on non-reproductive sexual behavior in animals, which there's lots more than what I just covered. So if you are interested, you can check that out. There's some weird
if you
stuff.
Want to completely destroy your search history,
like we do,
go down that route.
Yep.
Oh, our search histories are. The algorithm sometimes doesn't know what to do, I'm sure.
Kirk, I literally did an entire episode on the history of the anus. So yeah, we're just. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you did.
That was. Yep, you sure did.
Good job,
I believe
Victoria.
The phrase "human donut"
Welcome.
Came out of that episode. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, it did.
I mean, combine that with the stuff I look up for my nursing homework, and it's just, my search history is real weird.
Oh, man.
Yeah, that's what I got this week.
Amazing.
Thanks,
what
Victoria.
a show once again. Yeah, thanks. Well, we'll see what happens next week, I guess, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
It's always a new and
Thanks,
exciting something.
Yep. Have a good
Bye-bye.
one. Bye-bye.
Thanks everyone for listening to today's show. Be sure to subscribe. New episodes drop every Wednesday, and we love sharing this strange world with all of our listeners. If you would be so kind as to leave us a 5-star review, that would be great. It lets other lovers of the strange discover the show. You can reach out to us on social media by searching for Strange by Nature Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. You can send us an email as well. Our address is contact@strangebynaturepodcast.com. If you want more information about the show, you can also check out our website, which is strangebynaturepodcast.com. Until next week, get outside, stay curious, and embrace the strange.